I must have been about 19. It was one of those college parties that you just had to go to, you know? It was in the basement of a house that was already tired of parties. The air was hot and thick, smelled like a mix of fog machine smoke and cheap booze. The music was so loud it vibrated in your chest, like a second heartbeat. I was with my friends. My costume was the simplest thing in the world. Cat ears, a little makeup. I felt fine. I was surrounded by people, by faces I knew. It was loud, it was chaos, but it was our chaos. Back then, I thought being in a crowd meant you were safe. I couldn't have been more wrong. I saw him for the first time near the stairs. There were a lot of people in costume, but he was different. He was dressed as a jester. The costume looked old, made of black and red velvet, with bells on the hat that for some reason made no sound at all. But it was the mask that froze me. It was white porcelain, a huge red smile painted on it, and the eyes were just two black, empty holes. He wasn't dancing, wasn't talking to anyone, just standing there, watching everyone, tilting his head from one side to the other. Slowly, I felt a shiver down my spine. I tried to ignore it. I thought, it's Halloween. The guy's just really committed to his costume. You always try to find a reason for the things that scare you. It's easier than admitting something is wrong. But he was everywhere. I went to get a drink, and he was there, in the corner of the kitchen, watching me. The mask's smile seemed wider there, in the dark. I went back to the party, tried to distract myself, danced with my friends, and when I looked over my shoulder, there he was, on the other side of the basement. That white mask, a blank spot in the middle of the crowd, turned directly towards me. The room started to feel smaller. The sweaty walls felt like they were closing in around me. I nudged my friend. "That jester guy is creeping me out," I said. She glanced over, shrugged. "Relax, he's just some weirdo. Ignore him." But I couldn't. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was something else. And he was there for me. I needed air. The basement was crushing me. I ran up the stairs and went out the back door, onto a small wooden balcony on the second floor. The cold air was a relief. I leaned on the railing, looking down at the dark yard below, trying to get my heart back to normal. The party music felt distant. I heard the door creak behind me. It was him, the jester. He stopped right in the doorway, filling the whole frame. My only way back inside. The bells on his hat were still silent. He didn't move, just stood there staring at me with those two black holes. Then he spoke. His voice was low, almost a gravelly whisper. It didn't match the costume at all. "I like your ears," he said. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a compliment. It was proof. Proof that he wasn't just looking, he was watching. Every detail. The silly costume I was wearing. He took a slow step forward. I backed away until I hit the railing. I had nowhere to go. "Why are you running?" he said with that same horrible calm. "The party's out here." He lifted a gloved hand and touched one of the silent bells on his hat. I realized why they made no sound. They were solid wood, painted to look like metal. Fake. Just like everything else about him. I was trapped. My only chance was to get past him. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and lunged forward, brushing my shoulder against the side of his body. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, letting me pass. And as I ran desperately through the door, I heard his low voice behind me one last time. "See you around." I stumbled down the stairs, screaming for my friends. This time, the panic in my voice was too real to be ignored. We searched for him. We looked in every corner of that house, but he was gone. No one saw him leave. In fact, no one even remembered seeing him arrive. It was like he was never there. The police couldn't do anything. Did he hurt you? Did he threaten you directly? No. He just chose me. He isolated me. He showed me he could get to me at any time. And then, he let me go. That was the worst part. It wasn't an attack. It was a game. And I was the toy. Years have passed. But I've never felt safe in a crowd again. A party isn't a place for fun anymore. It's a place to search. I scan every face, every costume, every dark corner. The terror isn't a monster that attacks you in the dark. It's the realization that the monster can be right next to you, dancing, smiling behind a mask. They ask me why I'm still afraid. Because I know he didn't disappear. He just took off the costume, The real mask is the normal face he wears every day. And sometimes when I'm in a crowd, I feel it. That feeling of being watched. And I know somewhere out there, the jester is still looking at me. When I was 9, my parents let me go trick-or-treating without them for the first time. It was the biggest deal in the world. I went with Mikey, my best friend. The rule was to be back by 9. The streets were full of other kids in costumes, you know? Monsters, superheroes, everyone running from house to house, comparing their candy. We felt like we owned the world that night. It was getting late when we got to this one house, kind of isolated and surrounded by tall bushes. We rang the bell. An older man answered, grayish hair, a mustache. He started asking about our costumes, talking to us like we were 5, not 9. Then he asked, "Where are your parents?" We said we were alone, and the way he looked, it was weird. I can't explain it. He seemed surprised. Right then, I felt that something wasn't right. But you know how it is. We just wanted more candy. Then he opened the door all the way. His living room was transformed into a maze of cardboard boxes, all decorated with Halloween stuff. "If you want infinite candy," he said, "you have to win the challenge." We thought it was the coolest thing ever. A challenge. We went in right away. But when he closed the door behind us, the lock made a really loud click. I went into the cardboard tunnel first. Mikey followed. It was dark inside, with just a few orange lights blinking. Fake spider webs brushed against our faces. At first it was fun, but the tunnel just kept going. We'd turn a cardboard corner and it would lead to another and another. It started to feel weird. It wasn't so fun anymore. The tunnel's exit led to a small room, and there was a door with a note on it. "Candy down there." Mikey opened the door. It was a staircase to a basement. There was an orange light coming from down there too. The man was nowhere to be seen. We started to go down the stairs, calling for him, but the basement was huge and empty. It smelled damp. There was no candy. There was nothing. Just a cold, concrete floor. Suddenly we heard a slam from upstairs. The door, and the sound of a lock turning. We ran back up the stairs. The door was locked. We pushed, we banged, we yelled, but it was no use. That's when the fear really hit. Your heart starts beating so fast. We were trapped. And that's when the crying started, screaming for help, even though we knew no one would hear us. That's when we heard the doorbell ring. Once, twice, over and over. We got quiet, listening. We heard the front door open, and voices, 2 men yelling. With all the strength we had, Mikey and I started screaming. "Help! We're down here!" We heard footsteps running towards us. The lock on the basement door turned and the door flew open. But it wasn't the man with the mustache. It was a couple, a man and a woman with pure panic in their eyes. The woman hugged us and told us to run. As we passed through the living room, I saw the man. He was standing in the corner, next to his cardboard labyrinth, just watching us leave without saying a word. The neighbors took us to their house across the street. They said they saw us go in and thought it was strange that we hadn't come out yet. They called the cops. They arrested the guy. You know, when you're 9, you don't really get how serious it is. To me, it was just a really scary adventure. But today I get it. I get that empty basement. There was never going to be any candy down there. What he wanted with us. That's why he made sure we were alone. We didn't get saved because we were smart. We got saved because of luck. That's it. Because a couple of neighbors decided to look out their window. And that's what scares me to this day. What would have happened if they hadn't been looking? We were one locked door away from, I prefer not to even imagine. I was 8 years old. Back in 1984, Halloween. It was the best night of the year. Better than Christmas, better than my own birthday. It was the only night adults let you wander the streets after dark, and they gave us endless candy. My costume was a skeleton. You know, the cheap kind that came in a cardboard box. The plastic mask had that chemical smell that stuck to your skin, and the thin elastic, God, it always pulled at your hair. But I didn't care. Nothing could ruin Halloween. My sisters, Tiffany and Tamara, were older. They thought they were too cool for full costumes, so they wore witch hats and makeup. I remember the weight of my pillowcase getting heavier and heavier with candy. The sound of all the wrappers rustling. I remember us laughing, our breath forming clouds in the cold October air. My mother, she was standing in the doorway, smiling. She told us not to eat it all at once. My stepfather, David, was there too. Leaning against the doorframe, watching, always watching. He was a quiet man, too quiet maybe. To an 8-year-old, he was just a shadow in the corner of every memory. I wish I'd known then what that kind of silence could hide. We got home around 9, our cheeks stinging from the cold, our hearts still racing from the night's adventures. The ritual was sacred. Dump everything on the living room carpet, sort by candy type, negotiate trades. The house felt warm and safe, filled with our laughter and the crinkle of wrappers. We were on the floor, counting, when we heard the first strange sound. It wasn't a scream. It was a thud, muffled, from my mother's room, in the back of the house. Tamara looked at Tiffany. Tiffany, always the oldest, just said, "They're probably just talking." But the sound of their talk was different. My mother's voice sounded strained. And suddenly, nothing. I didn't understand. I simply went back to my candy, but the air in the house changed. It felt heavy. The smell of chocolate simply disappeared, and this silence took its place. A silence that actually felt loud. That silence was broken by Tiffany, my oldest sister. Her voice was a sharp whisper. "Stay here," she said. Tiffany, brave Tiffany, got to her feet. "I'm just gonna check," she whispered, but her voice trembled. She told us to stay put. Tamara, never wanting to be left behind, followed her into the dark hallway. I watched them go, and the safety of the living room just evaporated. My 8-year-old mind didn't know what was happening, but my instinct did. The primal part of my brain screamed one word: hide. I scrambled to my feet, my candy forgotten, and ran for my room. I didn't just close the door. I tried to melt through it. I slid under my bed, into the darkness that felt like my only friend. I pressed my face against the cold wooden floor, my world shrinking to that small, dark space. And I listened. I heard a scream, not a long one. It was short, like it was cut off. And then, silence again. A silence that was so much worse than before. I pulled my knees to my chest, trying to make myself smaller, trying to stop my own breathing so I could listen. But there was nothing to listen to, just the sound of my own heart hammering in my ears. I lay there, under the bed, frozen, waiting for a sound that I never wanted to hear. The sound I was waiting for. It was footsteps, slow, heavy, coming down the hallway, coming closer to my door. I squeezed my eyes shut, as if that could make me invisible. The footsteps stopped right outside my room. A lifetime passed in that silence. Then, the doorknob turned. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. The door opened without a sound, swinging inward, cutting a slice of dim hallway light into my dark sanctuary. A pair of legs stood in the doorway. For a full minute, that's all that happened. I thought if I didn't move, if I didn't breathe, I would become part of the dark, that he would leave. Then he knelt, slowly, deliberately, and when his face appeared in that narrow gap between the bed frame and the floor, my world ended. Those weren't David's eyes looking back at me. They were empty windows into nothing. No recognition, no humanity, no soul, just a void wearing my stepfather's face. He was looking at me, but seeing through me, like I was already dead. Like I was just an obstacle to be removed. The smell hit me then, coppery, like old pennies, and thick. It clogged my throat. He reached under the bed. His hand was cold, so cold, it clamped around my ankle, and the strength in it was wrong. It was effortless. He pulled me out from under the bed like I was a toy. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. My body was just gone. I was a doll in the hands of something terrible. He lifted me up. I remember the ceiling of my house looked strange from that angle. I remember seeing the living room as he carried me through. The colorful candy wrappers scattered on the floor looked like fallen leaves after a storm. He opened the front door, and the cold night air hit my face. That's the last thing I remember with any clarity, the feeling of that cold air. The next 2 days are a blur of confusion and fear. The police found me. They said he was arrested. He had tried to kill himself, but he failed. For a little while, it felt like it was over. The nightmare was locked away. People. Therapists. They've asked me for years what happened next. They ask what happened to my sisters. What happened to him? They have their reports, their files, their theories. But they weren't there. The truth is, I don't know where the memory ends and the nightmare begins. In my mind, I never left that house. I am 41 years old, but I am still 8. I am still under that bed, smelling the dust, listening to the silence. They tell me he was just a man, but a man feels something. Anger, hate, joy, something. The thing that took me from my room that night, it felt nothing. And the most terrifying part of it all, as it carried me out into the world, into the Halloween night, the world was quiet, the street was empty, the night was calm. It was as if nothing had happened at all, and nobody was coming to help.